Chapter 16, Section 2. Before the Second Industrial Revolution, cities were very compact. I mean, you're talking, even in your largest cities, you could walk from anywhere in the city to the center of the city 45 minutes. One thing you'll notice in this picture as well is they don't have super tall buildings. A lot of your buildings are going to be 3 to 4 story, limited at about 5 stories. That was about it. And for a very simple reason, that's as high as people could comfortably walk. But between the Civil War and the year 1900, the urban population is going to jump. It was about 20% of the population. It's going to jump to about 40% of the population. And with all of these people moving to the cities, this population needs to be dealt with. The people, we need room for the people. And so the physical landscape of the cities are going to change. And the cities are going to spread upward and outward. The way that the cities spread upward was because of skyscrapers. Skyscrapers are going to be possible due to Elisha Otis. 1852, he invents or develops the mechanized elevator. Doesn't develop the elevator, but he actually develops a safety device that would stop an elevator from falling. So that way, people would confidently use it. You can see over there on that right picture, the rope's broken, but he is on the elevator still not falling. And if people had confidence in the elevator, they'd use them. And you can now build taller buildings. But you're going to have to build them a little different. You can't use masonry walls. The problem with masonry walls were they're too weak. As you stack brick or block on top of each other, eventually you're going to reach a point where there's going to be so much weight on the bottom levels that they crush. So you're going to see the development of steel frames. Steel frames mean they carry the weight of the building, not the walls. With steel frames, the walls are literally used only to keep the outside outside and the inside inside. And so that's why you see a lot of skyscrapers today that the walls are actually windows. As they're keeping the outside outside and the inside inside, they don't need to be the strength that's holding up the building. So now you have more room for workers in the business district with these taller buildings. The other way that it spread was out, and that's going to be through mass transit. When we talk mass transit, we're talking about public transportation, whether that's commuter trains, whether it's subways, whether it's trolley cars. That's all mass transit. Frank J. Sprague is going to design the first mass transit system in Richmond, Virginia in 1888. With mass transit, you don't have to live near work. You could live a little farther away and use the mass transit to get to the business district. And so you're going to see cities grow. Before mass transit, your typical city took up about 3 square miles. After mass transit, it's going to grow to about 20 square miles. And now that you have mass transit, you're going to have the development of suburbs. These residential neighborhoods on the outskirts of the city. Mass transit makes them possible. You can now afford to travel from your home in the suburb into the city to work. Mass transit was cheap. It might cost like a nickel. There's a suburb today, full of houses, very few businesses in there, and those people travel usually into the city to work. All right. Let's talk about the people. You've always heard people talk about the upper class or the rich class, and you have the middle class, and you have the lower or the poor class. But during this time period, you're going to have the development of a new class. You're going to have the development of the Nouveau riche. The Nouveau riche, the newly rich. These were going to be people that are going to very quickly make massive amounts of money in steel, in mining, in railroads, things like that. These industries that were growing at this time. Some examples are, you've got Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie is going to make massive amounts of money in the steel industry. You've got John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller is going to make tons of money in the oil industry. Cornelius Vanderbilt in the railroad industry. And the Nouveau riche are going to make a ridiculous amount of money, and they loved to publicly display their wealth. They wanted people to know how rich they were. And you're going to end up with something called conspicuous consumption. This is the idea of spending money just to display your wealth. And one of the big status symbols was to have a home on Fifth Avenue in New York City. And they built these large, magnificent homes along Fifth Avenue. But this wasn't their only home. They usually would have these magnificent country estates. They spent money like it was nothing. Throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars into a party one evening. I mean, that's a lot of money today, let alone back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. They would also imitate British Victorian culture, trying to maintain this proper level of social behavior. And they'd have these magazines that would tell them how they should behave properly at home and away, in a certain way that they would carry themselves. And many Americans criticized the Nouveau riche. They thought they were just throwing away the money. But a number of the Nouveau riche also did support social causes as well. They built art galleries or supported them, and libraries and museums and other good causes. But then you'd also hear people criticize them for that and say, oh, they're just donating to that charity just to show how much they could donate. They're just showing off. So that's the Nouveau riche. The middle class is going to increase as well. With all these new industries, we needed more of that mid-level worker, more accountants and clerks and engineers and managers and salespeople. But with the middle class, you needed some sort of education. We needed an educated worker for these jobs. And you're going to have more professional schools and organizations forming in the late 1800s to train these workers. Now, very few women were allowed in these professional jobs, but there were some new opportunities for women as well. Sales clerks, secretaries, stenographers, things like that. But women in the business were usually paid less than men. Most of your married, middle-class women, they worked at home. But their life's going to change as well. Their workload is going to be lightened at home with things like hot and cold running water in the house, with things like being able to buy their clothes. This is going to free up a lot of time from carrying in water or heating water or making clothes. They now had more time to focus on their kids.